So I'm joined now live by CTV political analyst Tom Mulcair for a closer look at the Liberal leadership race. Good to have you, sir. Happy New Year.
Good to be with you, Lindsay. All the best to you, too, and your family.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so let's get right into it. There is so much to go over here. Obviously, the shock, if there was any, has kind of worn off with Justin Trudeau announcing his resignation. But before we get into, some potential candidates here, let's talk about the actual process of selecting a new leader for a federal party. What does that look like, and how long are we expecting that to take, maybe?
Usually, it looks like a party taking care of its internal affairs. Think, the election of Andrew Scheer as head of the Conservatives, or Erin O'Toole, or even more recently, Pierre Poilievre. But this is very different, Lindsay, because the rules here will determine who will be the next Prime Minister of Canada. Whoever wins this leadership race automatically becomes our Prime Minister. So that changes it because all Canadians have an interest in what those rules are going to be. They have to be transparent, and I believe they have to be in lockstep with the normal rules for being allowed to choose your Prime Minister or your MP. In other words, it should be the same rules qualifying you as whether or not you're a voter. What are those three rules? You have to be 18 years of age or older, you have to be a Canadian citizen, and you have to be on the electoral list. If the Liberals contrive, and some of them were suggesting that they go back to the rules they had that got Trudeau in, more than 10 years ago, they came up with a category of people who were not even members. You didn't have to be a Canadian citizen. You could have been 14 years old. All great stuff when it's a party taking care of its own. But this is the Liberals responsible for a decision that affects all Canadians. It's a serious matter, and they better hew to that line. We also saw in the clip, we saw Mélanie Joly saying she's, musing about running. That's her absolute right. But we've got to be very careful we don't have conflicts of interest. When she came out with a strong statement against Trump yesterday, was that Mélanie Joly talking for and on behalf of all Canadians as a member of cabinet? Or was that Mélanie Joly, the potential candidate, trying to position herself in a leadership race? That type of conflict of interest simply can't be happening. And Mr. Trudeau, who's still the Prime Minister, is going to have to set down clear rules saying, if you're running, you can't be in cabinet. That is obvious.
Okay, I didn't actually know that part. That's very interesting. All right, so with that kind of down, when we look at, Mike's report, as you just referenced as well, some of the people that maybe haven't actually explicitly said they're running yet, but are maybe considering it, Chrystia Freeland, Mark Carney, Mélanie Joly, as you mentioned, Anita Anand, Christy Clark as well. Is there anyone in particular that you think maybe stands out from the rest or has a better chance?
I think the outside candidates, you just mentioned, there's a fellow named Frank Baylis, a wonderful gentleman, a senior businessman who's done very well, announced he's running. He was once an MP. Mark Carney, former governor of the Bank of Canada. Christy Clark, former premier of BC. They have one thing in common. They are free of the load in their backpack of carrying around everything that Justin Trudeau did, right or wrong. And so if you're Chrystia Freeland, even if she walked away from cabinet a couple of weeks ago, Mr. Trudeau reminded everyone at his Monday press conference that she was his partner every step of the way in every decision he took. So she can't shake off the Trudeau years, and that's what people were so upset about across Canada. And that's why there was such internal dissent within the Liberal Party. They were trying to make Mr. Trudeau understand that his reign was over, his time was up. If these people try to come back, the ones who are in cabinet, think of Wilkinson, think of Joly, think of others. If they come back and say, well, I'm completely different. Well, the question is, well, why didn't you vote against any of this stuff when you were in cabinet? How come you were in lockstep with Mr. Trudeau? So Carney and Clark and, well, indeed anyone else who was not part of that regime has a bit of a lead in my view.
Even though we are watching the Conservative Party already saying everyone is associated with Justin Trudeau, and no matter who they elect, there won't be a change. I did also want to mention something that I also heard in Mike's report about, whoever becomes the next leader needs to bring the Liberal Party back to the center, away from the far left. I also heard on another channel someone else describing Justin Trudeau as a radical Liberal when he first came into power because of how far left he brought the Liberal Party. Do you agree with all that, that there needs to be some changes?
No, I'd be hard-pressed to give you examples of where Trudeau made the Liberal Party a hard left party. But I think that what those people are trying to say is that if you want change that's, conservatives, if you want to go right, then don't vote for anybody in the Liberal Party. But there's quite a spectrum, even amongst the candidates that are already announced. There are people who are very strong backgrounds in business. Frank Baylis is a good example. Then you got somebody like Jonathan Wilkinson. He's had really strong handle on environment and energy issues. With regard to Mark Carney, yes, he's a central banker. Yes, he's worked at some of the largest corporations. He's got extraordinary credibility on issues involving sustainable development, the environment, climate change. Look at what's happening today. in Pacific Palisades in California. Look at the fires there. These things have been modeled for decades. We knew what global warming would bring in terms of dryness, in terms of rapid winds, in terms of wildfires of the type that we're seeing. Mr. Trump denies that climate change is an issue. He says it doesn't exist. Mr. Poilievre says the same thing. Well, he'll try to convince us that he's not a climate change denier, but when he denies that you have to do anything about climate change, he's denying that climate change is a problem. So those are big issues that are going to be on the table, and I don't think that Mr. Poilievre is going to be able to walk away from that easily.
Hard to when you see what's happening out there, especially when everything is going up in flames. Okay, I've got a little more time to ask you just one last question because you did bring in Donald Trump there. So just lastly, obviously, the time is of the essence here. This is not good timing for, the Liberal Party, for anyone really, when it comes to, we're almost at January 20th. There's threats of tariffs, threats of possible annexation. With all of that in mind, obviously, this brings a lot more pressure to the Liberal Party to choose a leader quickly. Would you agree?
Absolutely. Oh, yeah. And they've got basically 75 days to lay down the rules, get the fundraising done, get the memberships in, get the rules in place, get everything evaluated, have some speeches and some debates across the country, and then come up with a new leader. That's an incredibly reduced timeline. But it couldn't, as you correctly say, Lindsay, it couldn't be coming at a worse time. The last thing we needed as we were dealing with Trump 2.0 is more instability, more insecurity. And yet here we are. If Poilievre were to win, then we would have had Trudeau as the prime minister, Trudeau's replacement for maybe a couple of months, and then Poilievre. We would have had 3 prime ministers in 6 months. That is a sign of instability, and it's incongruous that we're going through this now, but it's because Trudeau held on for so long, wouldn't leave when it was clear to everyone that he had to leave. He kept, I guess, hoping for some sort of miracle. I'll take the GST off your Christmas tree. Oh, here, I'll send you a $250 check. And none of that stuff worked, and so now he's finally had to walk away from it. But he's left a stinking mess. There's no question about that.
Okay, lots to look forward to, lots to watch for. That is our CTV political analyst, Tom Mulcair, joining us live. Thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
All the best, Lindsay. Take good care.
You too.